was a bad accident. Motorcycle had hit a Charger head on. I mean, the gas tank was in the middle of the road, the intersection, and we're sitting there and it's dead quiet in the car. I'm waiting for the cop to wave us through, and my 6-year-old, my daughter, she comes out of the back seat and she said, "Daddy, let's pray for him." And boy, I tell you right there, it's like right then and there, like it still tears me up. What I mean? That was a beautiful moment that I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and he's working through me just to help other people, man. Used to, depending on how long I had been up or what substance I was on, my kids didn't know if I was walking through that door, and if I did, who was walking through that door. And knowing today that they know who's coming home, unless some divine something happens that I can't control, they know I'm coming home and who's walking through that door and what to expect. And that's powerful, dude.
This episode of The Recovery Couch is brought to you by JB Davis at South Dayton Toyota. For integrity, service, and unbeatable deals, call JB and his team at 513-267-5225 and tell them The Recovery Couch sent you. What's up, sobriety gangsters? Welcome back to another episode of The Recovery Couch. I'm your host, Brandon Couch, and today we have an awesome episode in store for you. Today we welcome Kenneth O'Neal, a behavioral health technician in Shreveport, Louisiana. Kenneth has transformed his life, and he is here to tell you about it. Kenneth, how you doing today, brother?
Pretty good, man. How you doing? I'm glad to be here.
Gosh, yeah, man, I'm doing so good. Thanks for asking. So let's just get straight to it, bro. Tell us about your story.
Man, so my name's Kenneth. I identify as an alcoholic and an addict. That's just for a reminder to self, because I don't ever want to forget. My sobriety date is January 12th of 2024. I remember that date. I don't ever want to forget it. I was walking into treatment hopefully for the last time, full of fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, all the things that kept me sick for a long time. So a little backstory, I grew up kind of normal. My mom and dad were separated, but there wasn't nothing, that really triggered anything until I was about 11 or 12, and I got started with weed and pain pills. By the time I was 14, I was dabbling in ecstasy and all those things. By the time I was 17, I've done everything. Shot up, cracked, everything I said that I wasn't never going to do. I turned into that person, but then at the time, like I graduated high school, I had a scholarship to Northwestern for playing the cello. There wasn't a lot of consequences behind my actions at that point in time. There was still fun, quote unquote, habit, and, my older brother, he OD'd 3 days after his 19th birthday and laid in ICU on life support for a month and a half before he passed away. And I think that's where really things started spiraling. It didn't get out of control. I mean, I'm fixing to turn 38, so it took me a long time to get to this point. But I think that's when things I really lost control of things, I lost sight of things. I didn't go to college. They took my scholarship. I got arrested. The legal trouble started happening for me. Every time I would try to get a fresh start, I would move. The only problem with that is wherever I move, there I am. I remember one time I moved all the way up to Colorado. I'm down in Louisiana. I was like 17 hours away. I know absolutely nobody up there. I get off the Greyhound bus, and within 20 minutes, I'm walking down the street with this guy I don't even know to go get a bag. And 3 days later, I'm homeless, sleeping in the snow, and I'm like, how did this happen? This is not what I want. I left up there with the best intention, but that, looking back on it now and where I'm at today, that's what happens when Kenneth is running on Kenneth's will and not my higher power. When I'm relying on self, it never ends well, and, I called home, got back down here. It had gotten so bad to the people that love me the most. I remember one time I was homeless. I've been sleeping in a tent under the bridge for like 5-6 months. My mom called me and she's like, "Son, where are you at?" And I told her where I was at, and she's like, "I'm coming to get you," and I'm like, cool. I get to get back inside, take a shower and sleep in a bed. We get there, And she walks me through the house and she opens her back door and she's like, pitch your fucking tent. I had to sleep in my mom's backyard in a tent because I was not allowed inside. Now when they left home, I would crawl through the doggy door, and go in and do what I wanted to do. The sad part about that is that I could actually fit through a doggy door. I was severely underweight. You know, the last 15 years though, I was an opiate addict. That controlled everything that I did, every move that I made. If I did not have my fix, I wasn't going. I missed out on a lot of family time, a lot of events. I did a lot of people dirty in the process. Um, where my recovery journey really started at, I didn't know it at the time, but it was back in 2016 or 2017. I was at work. I had been drinking. I was a bartender for a long time. That's not a good occupation for an alcoholic like myself. But yeah, an off-duty city marshal came up to me. He was a customer there at the time, but me and him ended up getting in a fight. And I remember coming to handcuffed to a bed at the hospital with two deputy marshals standing at the foot of my bed. And for a normal person, they'd be like, you know what, I don't need to do that again. But that wasn't the case for me. I sat in jail probably like 9 months that time. I got out on parole. I completed my parole. I don't know how, but because I wasn't sober. Um, but I would do those little Sure Gel and orange juice tricks before I would go and check in every month. That's probably how I skated by. But in that process, I met my now wife when I got out in 2018, I think. And like as soon as I got those release papers after getting off parole, I was back to doing the same old thing. My daughter was born in 2019. I share this too a lot. So the day that my wife, we were having the baby, my mom was there. The doctors are in the room. My wife's legs are in. I went down to smoke a cigarette and I come back upstairs, and the doctor's like, Dad, come up here. We're finna have this baby. And I was like, well, hold on. I got to go to the bathroom real quick. I'm in the bathroom breaking down a line of Subutex. It's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. And the first thing my mind goes to is I need to get my fix, and that's how powerful it was for me. I would say every day for the last 15 years, but there was days in between, you can't find it or whatever going on. And, how powerful it was for me. As soon as somebody told me that they had them, I automatically felt better. I haven't even done the drug yet, and I already got a sense of relief. And that's powerful. That's powerlessness. Like in this disease, and it consumed me. Um,
Let me ask you a
2022.
question real quick,
Yeah, go ahead.
Kenneth.
Go ahead.
You said the Sure Gel orange juice trick. What is that?
So there's like little tricks that you could do to help pee clear, I guess, when you would go in for probation or jobs. I always knew like a niacin kind of thing. You take these things and it kind of helps you not necessarily pee clean. It's the diluted test, or a cover up, if you will. It's kind of like one of those drinks that you could buy at a smoke shop, or something like that. It just was a little trick that I knew from growing up and other people. You could do that combination and you pee clear. So it's really a diluted test, but like it just they wasn't able to test anything. So that's how I really got by when I was on parole that last time. But
Yeah, I'd never heard of that one. So anyway, the Subutex was the first thing that came to your mind
yeah,
on the day that your daughter's being born.
yeah, yes, sir. Yeah,
I've
I
been
mean,
there.
and that's just the control it had over me. You know, I didn't know how long the doctors were going to be in there and how long that whole thing was going to be. So my first thought was like, well, let me make sure I'm okay first. I used to call it medicine, but I cannot stand that term anymore. And I'm not trying to knock anybody. There is the MAT program, medical assisted treatment, if that's necessary. I'm not trying to, but for my journey, I had to completely cut all those things out. If they're used in a medical facility to help you come down off certain other substances, I understand 100% if you use it the way that they're supposed to be used. Me, I know what to go in and tell the doctor to get what I want. And of course, I'm not doing them the way that they're prescribed to be done. I like to snort stuff. I like to, use some water on some things. Like that was the way I did stuff. So if you're leaving it up to the addict like me, I'm never going to stop doing them. But again, if they're in an assisted environment where they wean you down off stuff, then absolutely, if it helps, by all means. So I'm not trying to knock anybody whose pathway that's what they're taking, because I know everybody's ways is different. I'm just speaking for what I had to do. I had to cold turkey that stuff, and that was rough, especially sitting in a jail cell. It was not pleasant, but back to the part where I was at in 2022. One of my best friends that we were in the trenches together. We did a lot of stuff together growing up in our adulthood, and he got locked up and he hung himself in one of our maximum state prisons down here. And it really, if he can't make it, why, like the mental, I don't know, it messed with me pretty bad. And I was at work like 3 days later, and I was walking into a gas station, and I kicked something on the ground. And when I look down, there's a bag of dope, and I pick it up and I go straight to the bathroom, and knowing what's out there these days, that shit could have killed me, and I went straight to the bathroom and broke down a line, and I was off to the races. Yeah, I wish I had the picture handy, but man, when I tell you I was down to 130 pounds, my face was discolored, the circles under my eyes. Like, I mean, dude, I don't know. I look pretty bad looking back on it, and
Were you not eating?
no, I mean, minimum,
Hardly.
minimum. I mean, my wife would cook, but the part of the insanity, I would take a couple bites and say, well, okay, I'm gonna eat later, and I would put it in the microwave. When they would go to sleep, I would feed some of it to the dog, and then so when she seen the rest of it in the trash can, it looked like I actually ate some. So no, I wasn't really, there at the end. It was alcohol and the Subutex to start my day, and then I was, doing meth throughout the day. That all came crashing to a halt when I got arrested for possession, and I bonded out. I got my mom and my wife to come get me out of jail, and I remember court was coming up, and I remember I had been up for like 4 days, and I had to go to court. So I don't know, in my diseased mind, like I convinced my mom. We stopped at the liquor store on the way to court that morning, and I had about 4 shots before I walked into court, and I fell asleep in the courtroom. Of course, the judge was not happy about that, and she piss tested me, and I failed for like 5 things, and that one that rung out to me is when she said fentanyl, and I was like, I've never done any fentanyl, and she's like, it's in the dope that they have out there now, and like talking to my wife since I've gotten sober, it had gotten so bad, like there were nights when she would come downstairs and I would be crashed on the couch. And she said she would have to sit beside me because my breathing was so shallow, because you're mixing fentanyl with the Subutex, unknowingly that's what I was doing. But like I mean, I could have died at any point, and
So you're saying that the meth you were using was cut with fentanyl?
absolutely, 100%. I failed 2 drug tests behind that in court, and again, and to my shock and awe, I was like, I've never done that. Well, let me rephrase. Back in the day, I had done some fentanyl patches, but that was 10 so years prior to this happening, and it's like I haven't done any of that. And that's when I was made aware that it's in the drugs that you're using, and on top of what I was knowingly ingesting, that could be a deadly combination, and I had no idea. See, in my diseased mind, I'm thinking that I just been going too hard for 3 or 4 days and my body's shutting down because I'm tired and I need to rest. And the reality of it is the fentanyl that was in it, I mean, I'd be standing up and falling over, like opiates do, and I just wasn't aware, and not to say realistically that probably wouldn't have stopped me, because I don't know how to stop. Even if I would have known that, I probably, I mean, I did know it after the first one and I kept doing it, you know. And that was, and again, I got a wife and 2 kids at home, you know.
And
So
it sounds like, Kenneth, correct me if I'm wrong, she was aware. You were trying to hide some of it at least by dumping some of the food into the trash can, but it sounds like she kind of knew.
yeah, she's not one of us, you know. Not to say that she's never drank or stuff like that growing up, but she does not um she does not lack the control of to say, hey, I'm not going to do that. And then, I mean, she can, yeah, she's definitely not one of us. And she definitely knew, you know. I remember the day that she found out about the meth use. I was standing outside on the phone and I had the pipe in my pocket, and I remember she come up and asked me for a cigarette, and I just kind of notioned towards my pocket, and she patted the wrong pocket, and there was the dope pipe, and I just remember the way she looked at me. And of course I blamed it on a friend, like I was just holding it for so and so, and again, she knew, but probably part of her was like she didn't want to believe it, so she probably just kind of dismissed it at first, but then it just kept on going and going, and just especially after I got arrested for possession of Schedule 2, there's no getting around it, and I remember laying in that jail cell for 2 or 3 hours crying because I was scared to call her. You know, the gig is up. I'm found. I got to tell her. She's gonna find out. You know,
Let me ask some questions there. So, when you get arrested for Schedule Two, uh, what were you supposed to be doing that day, and to make you scared to call her and tell her the truth of like, hey, I got arrested, and then what are the Louisiana laws like when it comes to?
okay. So what I was supposed to be doing that day, I had we had came back from staying the night at my mom's, right, and we were coming back across town, and of course I had been ready to get back over here on our side of the town so I could go across the street and get what I wanted. I remember I had lied to my mom and told her I didn't have any money. So she ended up buying my infant daughter diapers that day, and I had money in my pocket. It was just for reserved for meth. It wasn't to buy diapers. That's just the reality of what it was for me. Because I remember when I called, eventually did call, my mom was like, "I thought you didn't have any money." Now, and at the time, I even lied to her then and told her, "Well, he just fronted it to me." Like I got it on front because I was ashamed. I couldn't admit that out loud. And so the laws here, no matter first offense or not, it's automatic felony. You know, but you got to wait until you go in front of a judge for them to post a bail, which was like 3 or 4 days. And then of course I'm coming off the Subutex, I'm detoxing off that. Probably the alcohol and the meth too, but the Subutex really outweighs all the others. And that I used that to get them to come and get me. This was like October something, and my daughter's birthday is at the end of the month. At the end of October, so I used like, well, I need to be home for her birthday. I played that manipulation card. Like I was doing them any good being home anyways, but I made them feel sorry for me. And they came and got me. And then uh, well, no, yes,
So
they
you're
brought
talking about
me.
your family.
Yes,
You manipulated your family.
yes,
You're saying to come and bail you out.
yes. My wife and my mom. I manipulated them to come get me because my
And
daughter
then
was
what did you
really
tell the
close to me.
judge when you saw the judge finally?
So that was the initial arrest, right? And then, like what I was just talking about, when I went back to court, when I fell asleep in the courtroom, that was from that charge. So they had bonded me out when I went back to court. So that's when the judge held me on contempt of court and sent me to jail. And that's when they offered me treatment for the first time. And that was in December of 2022. That was the first time I
And
ever,
how
of
did you how did you respond to that? The offer to go to treatment. Did
course.
you act like I don't need it?
In the back of my mind, that's what I thought. Because the way this disease works, it's cunning, baffling, and powerful, man. Like, I literally, well, I've had the same job for over 3 years. We lived in the same house for over 3 years. In my mind, I was managing. If y'all would just let me do what I need to do, we'll be okay. That was full flight from reality. That was what I was lying to myself, you know. but I couldn't see it, you know?
Were
So
you
when I,
leveraging the Subutex? Was that a prescription from a doctor, and were you still leaning on that? Like, I need to, be able to get to my appointments so I can get my prescription, and telling the judges and your probation officers that this is what helps me. Were you still doing that?
yes, at that point,
Okay.
yes. It had gotten to the point to where I had, I had the prescription, you know, but like when I went to court that day and I failed that drug test, I failed for 5 things. And I was like, well, I got my medical card, and I got the prescription for the Subutex. And she's like, well, what about the alcohol, the amphetamine, and the fentanyl? I ain't never done no fentanyl, and that's when we found out about that. But like in my mind, it was justified, it was rationalized because I have a prescription for it. And like I said in the beginning, I wasn't doing it the way they were prescribed. So I'm abusing the medicine. I hate that term. I was abusing the drug. I was not using it for medicinal purposes, at all. So when they got me out and I fell asleep in the courtroom, she held me on contempt, and you can't bond out when the judge, there is no bond when the judge holds you like that. And so I sat for like 3 or 4 days, and they offered me treatment. And of course, me in my mind, I'm like, well, anything's better than sitting in CCC. Like I'm ready to go, and I'm detoxing. So it was like, but in the back of my mind, I knew, or I thought, I didn't need it, but anything to get out of that jail cell, I was like, I'll do it. You know, I remember going. They came and picked me up, and I remember going and sitting in there, and I'm in rough shape. I'm on like day 4 or 5 with no Subutex, and I remember sitting there, and one of the clients that were already there, he's like, "Man, you don't look so good." And I'm like, "Yeah, they just came and got me out of jail. I'm detoxing." He asked me what I'm detoxing off of. I told him. He's like, "Oh, don't even sweat it, bro. You can get those here." And I was like, "Oh, and there goes my addict brain. I know what to tell this doctor. I know what to say. I know what to do to get what I want. And of course, I've seen the doctor. They prescribed me the little strips, and I'm back to being okay. But the flip side of that, the entire it was 28-day program. The entire time I'm there, I'm lying and telling my wife that I'm sober. Things are different this time. Like I waited till like the last. I probably had like 3 days left before I told her. They're sending me home with a prescription. Like so I was even lying the whole time I was in there and acting like everything was okay. I think that's one of the biggest and hardest hurdles for me was getting over the fact of like being able to speak out and saying I'm not okay. I need help. That's hard for any individual, much less as a man. I'm not trying to admit defeat. This is not how I was raised. So when I got out, I had to do IOP as well, the intensive outpatient treatment or whatever. And I showed up drunk to IOP and they kicked me out. And of course, uh, I was scared to let the judge find out about that, but I had a court date coming up. So I thought in my grand scheme of things that some idea I had that I need to go to a meeting, like 3 days before. I thought it'd make me look good in front of the judge or something. But my first meeting I went to, I was drunk, because you could not convince me on a sober day that I need to go to a meeting. And I didn't understand what it was about, and they told me something very strange when I walked in there that day. They told me to keep coming back. Never heard people usually don't want me around. Here I am intoxicated, and I'm sure they knew, and he told me to come back. It didn't stick. I wasn't ready, but I had gotten that taste and I knew where to go, and of course I go back to court, and the judge had found out that I had been, kicked out for showing up drunk, and she held me on contempt of court again, and then I remember that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization they talk about. That I experienced that for the first time in my life because when they arrested me this time, they took my shoelaces from me, and I just remember sitting in that holding cell under the courthouse, like my fucking shoelaces, bro. Like, but you could see it that I was a threat to myself.
Yeah.
Like I was a threat to people, myself included. And I'll never forget that feeling of sitting down there and then taking my shoelaces, and it was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, I don't even have an answer, like I have every reason at home not to be doing the things that I'm doing. Even when I don't want to do these things, I continue to do these things. Like I need help, and I sat in jail that time for like 2 weeks on that contempt of court, and they offered me something called Caddo Parish Drug Court. And again, all I heard was you can go home today, and coincidentally, that was on my birthday in 2023. I took it on my birthday, and I probably think that was one of the best birthday presents I ever gave myself. I get into drug court, and who goes to drug court sober? So in my mind, I'm gonna do all the things again before I go in there, and it just kept that cycle going. I failed a couple drug tests while I was in there, and they sent me to a treatment center again. And man, I just remember after failing that last test that my counselor at the time at drug court, I remember her pulling me in her office, and she's like, Kenneth, what's going on? And I told her, I was like, I don't know. And she's like, well, if you don't, who does?
This episode of the Recovery Couch is brought to you by Greg Swartz at Remax Victory and Affiliates. Greg brings heart, hustle, and honesty to every deal. Call Greg at 937-477-8975 today and tell him the Recovery Couch sent you.
And I just, I think that point was like a pivotal point for me, and where I was like, so I'm going back to treatment again, in a
That's a
sense.
great question. That counselor asked a great question.
Yes.
That probably had you stuck, didn't it?
Oh, I didn't have an answer. Here I am,
If you
35
don't, then
years
who
old.
does?
Right. And here I am, 35 years old at the time. You know, I'm looking to back up the 3 year suspended sentence on my probation. You know, like what are you doing? What? And I remember her telling me, "Well, you're going back to treatment," and I was like, "Okay," And I told her I was like, I'm scared. I got a wife and kids at home. I'm the only one that works. And of course, all these consequences, I'm using them excuses to try to bail myself out of this trouble. Because if I believe gratitude is an action word. If I'm truly grateful for something, watch how well I take care of it. You know what I mean? And I would say that I'm grateful for my wife and my kids, but I'm doing everything to lose it. And like that was a point of I had to look at myself, and I think this time what made a big difference is she gave me time to go home and get my stuff together, right? Like pack my stuff and all these things to go. I'm going back to treatment. So first off, I had to tell my wife, and then I had to tell my kids, and then I had to call my boss and let him know I'm going back to treatment again. All them other times prior to leading up, it was always my wife cleaning up my mess. I was already in jail or I was already in rehab, and she had to call and let everybody know that, where I was at. This time I had to look these people that I care about the most in the eye and tell them, like this is my, it's my own make. This is what I'm doing. I have to do this. And it was pretty cool. They sent me down to the Hope Center down in Marksville, Louisiana. It's not a big town. It's a little Cajun town down there, down south, right outside of Alexandria. But it's exactly what I needed. They called it the Big Book Boot Camp. I was not there for the facility. I was there for the curriculum and what they were trying to teach me. And that place saved my life. Really. So like I think on day 3 you had like a 72-hour phone restriction. So I had to wait 3 days before I called home. And for the first time when I called home, I wasn't asking for things. I was asking how they were doing. You know, back up a little bit. In that December of 22, when I went to treatment for the first time, my wife was at home. It's freezing cold outside. We do not have running water. My wife's having to go next door and fill up 5-gallon buckets of water to be able to flush our toilets, to be able to boil water to wash dishes. My mom's having to come pick them up so they can go to her house to shower and wash clothes. But in my mind, I'm managing, like so. I don't ever want to forget that, So, and then fast forward and I get to treatment this next time, and I'm still calling home and asking when they're bringing me for cigarettes and all this stuff when I was in treatment the first time. So this time that I went, for the first time, like I called and asked how they were doing, and my wife informed me that um, my landlord, he knew where I was at. He told her not to worry about that month's rent. This is in January. So, my boss, he knew where I was at and he cut my wife a vacation check for hours I hadn't even worked yet, So I think that was the first time that God really got my attention. I had that jailhouse religion before, got saved and everything when I was in jail. But this time, like I was like, okay, God, like I surrender whatever you want me to do, I'll do it, and like, because obviously, in that 16-month time frame, I had been to treatment twice and in jail 3 times. Obviously, what Kenneth's doing isn't working, like, so I really had to surrender, and I got involved in the fellowship when I got home, man. I worked the steps. I got busy with my sponsor. I go to these meetings, that I did not want to go to. You know, um, Man, since being sober, I mean, dude, I've been able to take my family on a family vacation that I paid for. You know, um, I was able to buy 4 all new matching tires at the same time for my vehicle. Not those new used tires. I got 4 new tires at the same time. That was a big deal. You know, I was able to buy my wife a matching washer and dryer that has warranties and stuff on them. Like that's some adult stuff. That's not something that I do. That's something a higher power has allowed me to be able to do. One of the greatest gifts though that I have today, it's not material things. It's that my kids know who God is, right? So we were going to visit my wife's family for Christmas this past year, and there was a bad accident. A motorcycle had hit a Charger head on. I mean, the gas tank was in the middle of the road, the intersection, and we're sitting there and it's dead quiet in the car. I'm waiting for the cop to wave us through. And my 6-year-old, my daughter, she comes out of the back seat and she said, "Daddy, let's pray for her." And boy, I tell you right there, it's like right then and there, like it still tears me up. What I mean? That was a beautiful moment that I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and he's working through me, and like just to help other people, man. But like used to, depending on how long I had been up or what substance I was on, my kids didn't know if I was walking through that door, and if I did, who was walking through that door. And knowing today that they know who's coming home. Unless some divine something happens that I can't control, they know I'm coming home and who's walking through that door and what to expect. What I mean? And that's powerful, dude. I mean? That's something that I was taking for granted for so long. And to have that in my life today, it's a blessing that I don't ever want to take for granted. And it's through the 12-step program and working the steps and being of service to others, and now I work at a treatment center. Like that's I'm usually on the other side of it, sitting in those chairs, and to be put in that position to be able to help people like me, just like the techs where I was at, like just like the counselors where I was at, like those people showed me a way out. I knew there was a problem. I didn't know what the solution was, and it's a spiritual fix. And that was the one thing that I didn't want it to be, you know. But it turns out, it's given me a life that I could never even imagine, and I try to keep him first in everything I do. I wake up every morning, I say my prayers, I do a gratitude list every morning, and I know it sounds cheesy, what I mean, but for anybody that is struggling with mental health, depression, anxiety, or I just have a negative mindset. I like to focus on what's not going my way and what I don't have, and shifting gratitude, that has shifted that perspective. Like, one of the big ones that jumps out to me, is my daughter was, waking me up early on Saturday mornings, like early, like 6 o'clock, and it's my day off. Like I want to sleep in, and it was irritating me. Well, after about the second week of her doing that, I shifted it and I was like, you know what? I'm grateful my daughter can even wake me up today. Because there was times that I've been up for so many days, like, and I'm crashing. You're not waking me up, or I'm so drunk and passed out. If you do wake me up, watch out because I'm finna let you know how angry I am. I'm fixing to be throwing a temper tantrum. I mean, and so gratitude has really shifted that perspective on how I view things, even when life shows up, right? Because it happens, and just being able to walk through it with gratitude, really keeps you grounded, keeps you with a positive mindset. You know, another big thing too, I was teaching my son by how I was treating his mom what what was acceptable for how he was going to treat his spouse when he grows up. And then on the flip side of that, I was teaching my daughter what love looked like by the way I'm treating her mother. And she's going to look for that in somebody when she gets older. And that just don't sit right with me. I couldn't see these things, man. And then having a relationship with my higher power, man, like I struggled with that for a long time. Part of my insanity is like at times I didn't believe he was real. And then other times I try to convince other people that he wasn't real, and then I believed in him just enough to say, like, when something bad happened in my life, I'd be like, why, God? And then when anything good happened in my life, I was like, look what I did. So I believe in him just enough to place the blame, but not enough to give him the glory. You know what I mean? And that's just part of my story. You know, um, Man, I pray I never go back to that person. And as long as I do the things that I did yesterday, today, I got a pretty good chance of staying sober. Because as soon as I put that substance back in my body, dude, all those things that I've gained, everything that I care about, everything I love, is gone. I don't care about those things anymore because that disease can take control. And I'm done. Ugh.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable, Kenneth. It's a great testimony. And you sum it up so well on the surrender, man. You said right around the time you were in January, I think of 2024, you said it was January. And I'm assuming that was right around your sobriety date when you called home and you told you asked your wife how they were doing for the first time. The key word that I took out of that part of the story was surrender. And that seems like when you finally surrendered, everything started changing for the better. You started accepting the fact that there is a higher power, and that higher power is in control. And that the more that we can relinquish control, the more that Kenneth let go of Kenneth's will and relinquish control to God, the better off life became. And then the gratitude, man, understanding that there's plenty to be grateful for. I mean, and whatever I focus on is going to be kind of whatever I input is going to be what I output. So if I focus on the fact that I'm working on my Trailblazer and I can't fix this actuator, that's really happening in my life, by the way. Then I'm like, man, nothing's going my way. But if I focus on the fact that, this podcast is doing good and I'm making great relationships with you and Jason and people in Louisiana that's going to flourish, I can shift my focus to that and be grateful for that. And that's going to determine the output, what people see me produce. And I love how you summed it all up with that. Let me ask you one last question here, Kenneth. Say there's somebody who has struggled with opiate addiction. Um, they incorporate some speed along the way to kind of level themselves out so they're not sitting on the couch, nodding out, but they end up getting on medical assisted treatment. And they believe that's the only way they're ever going to be able to function properly. Right? How do you encourage that person that there is a better life in complete sobriety, right? And
Right.
without discouraging them that they can never see a doctor for medicine again. Because I like how you summed it up in your testimony. I think there is a difference between medicine and drugs. I think medicine becomes drugs when you start to use it outside of what you need it for. So if day 2 you're on pain medicine and the pain goes away and you're still taking the medicine, it turns into a drug. How do you encourage this person who's on medical assisted treatment that there is a better way, without discouraging them that they can never take an Advil ever again,
Right.
or you relapsed.
Right. So, and I know everybody's different. I don't know everybody's story, and I understand, trust me, I was on it for over 15 years, but the true freedom behind, it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be tough. A lot of it for me was fear, you know, um, of letting go, you know, but like when you realize how much control that it is taking in your life, and having to rely on something, to what end? Is that something that you want to do for the rest of your life? And when I asked myself that question, it became a lot easier to accept, you know, um, letting go of that and, what I need to do, you know, um, if somebody is okay with doing that for the rest of their life, then there ain't much that I can say, but if you're looking at it and it's something that has control over you, it's something that you might want to consider of letting go of. And, especially with the medical assistant treatment, dude, like they're gonna wean you down where those detox and the withdrawals are not. It's gonna, you're just gonna have some side effects, but it's not like cold turkey sitting in a jail cell, like that sucks. Um, so use it to your advantage. Don't use it as a crutch. Use it to your advantage, and just know that there are other people out there, that if I can do it, from the person that was snorting lines in the bathroom when my wife was in labor to, I mean, all the things, if I can do it, they can too. But you got to want it for yourself. You have to ask yourself the question, is this something that I want to do for the rest of my life? And if the answer is no, then what better time is the present? Start that journey. Reach out. There are so many different avenues and things of people to help you today that you're not alone. You don't have to do it by yourself, and get some help. If you really want to, there are ways to do it, and I just hope that that's some encouraging words, like, because a lot of it was fear for me, because I knew what the withdrawals were going to look like. I didn't want to do that. I was so fearful that I felt like I couldn't face that until I was forced to. Don't let it, and then especially if you're buying them off the street, the pill presses and everything that's going around these days, and what I mean, the store-bought kratom and 7-O, all this thing is taken by storm, and it's like, so it's readily available. If how I mean, so, and I'm not saying like readily available like in a good positive way. I'm saying like there's things you can go buy at a gas station, at least down south you can, and they're not any better than the store, the street, so don't replace one thing with another, and there is help. There are people to help you with that assistant, if that's something you really want to do, there's ways to go about it in a healthy way that, like it, and it's true freedom, man. That I don't have to wake up in the morning and wonder if I have that pill downstairs, and if I don't, the things that I was willing to do to go get it, I don't have to live like that today. And that, man,
Yep.
that's nothing but God's grace and mercy. And, surrendering is something I have to do every day. It's not a one and done kind of thing. I got to do that every day.
Amen, brother. I love that. Yeah, use it to your advantage. Don't use it as a crutch.
Right,
These things can be helpful, and the doctors do a good a job of titrating you off, or lowering your dose enough to where you can have minimal side effects.
right.
So yeah, that was a fantastic answer. Use it to your advantage. Don't use it as a crutch. Kenneth, I want to thank you, bro. Stick around with me for just a minute. We're going to have a little chat after this is over. I'm so thankful for you coming on and sharing your testimony. Thank you very much, man.
Thank you, brother. God bless.
Yep. And everybody, yep. God bless you too, man. And for everyone else, go get a copy of Step 4, A Journey Through Addiction. It's a roadmap, my roadmap for how I found God and surrendered. And I think you'll enjoy the read. And until then, remember that you always have a seat right here on the recovery couch.